In this week's market report, livestock and row crops, the big news last week. We start with beef production, a big issue considering the lower herd size. MSU Extension livestock economist Josh Maples tells us what to expect this year.
It is going to be lower. That's another kind of fascinating thing that's changed a little bit on us the last few months. You know, we started out the year talking about how tight beef supplies are going to be, and they're still projected to be lower than a year ago. We've got fewer cattle. We're going to process fewer cattle this year. So I do still expect, and USDA still expects, that we're going to see a lower beef production in 2024. But not quite as low as we previously expected. So USDA has increased their beef production forecast for the year, in large part due to those heavier weights that we talked about. So carcass weights are higher, cattle are sitting in feedlots longer, and they're getting heavier. Now there's a limit to how heavy they can get. You know, you can't do that forever and just drive weights up forever. But USDA has bumped up their beef production forecast based on these larger weights and slaughter totals that we've seen the last few months.
In this week's row report, Zach sat down with MSU Extension row crop economist Will Maples to ask about the latest USDA crop progress report and what planting season looks like so far.
Out of the latest crop progress report here in Mississippi, we're getting the crop in the ground at a pretty good pace. We're already 85% planted on corn, which is ahead of the normal average. We got about 52% of the soybean crop in the ground, which is a good bit above average as well. So, I mean, we've had some rain in the Delta regions, you know, the last few weeks, but producers have still been able to get the crop in the ground at a pretty good rate.
Yeah, we have had a lot of rains this spring, so that hasn't really affected things much?
For the most part, no. So we've just come at timely times, and they've been able to roll with the planters.
Outstanding. How is that looking on the national level?
So nationally, planting's off to a great start as well. For the most part, corn and soybeans are ahead of average. Iowa's pretty much all planted almost, but there is some dry weather still lingering up in Iowa, so some timely rains this past week have helped alleviate the situation, but a little bit more could be helpful.
Yeah, there's that ongoing drought that's been hitting the Midwest particularly hard, and a lot of that likely has to do with the El Nino weather pattern that's been coming through. But if I recall, we've got a La Nina coming soon.
Yes, that's right. So that's forecasted for the upcoming year. So, you know, we are seeing the rains come through. That drought situation is getting alleviated as we go forward, and overall, the expectation is for it to improve as, you know, we get into the time of year when the crop really needs the rain.
Well, let's take this one crop at a time then. How's corn looking right now?
So corn's most part getting planted well. You know, the latest USDA numbers has us planting 90 million acres. With how fast we're getting the crop planted, I imagine we put more in the ground than USDA's kind of said. We saw this last year when we had really good planting conditions. We planted about 3 million more acres than the USDA said we would in March. When the farmers can plant corn, they like to plant corn. So I imagine that number's going to jump based off how well planting's been going.
All right, so let's move on to soybeans then. How's that look?
Soybeans planting is going well. You know, we are projected to plant more than we did last year. Here in Mississippi, getting it in earlier is better. So earlier planted soybeans just yield better on average than later planted. So having a good timely planting, getting it in the ground early, should lead to a pretty good crop, given all the weather conditions going forward throughout the year.
That leads to a question of how's the crop look from South America this past year?
So, you know, Brazil's wrapping up soybean harvest. They had another huge crop, could have been a record average or almost a record soybean crop. You know, that's really what's kind of holding down U.S. prices as well. They're our biggest competitor on the global market. We had higher soybean prices the last few years. China shifted to buying more soybeans out of Brazil because they had large supply and could source it a little bit cheaper.
Let's move on to cotton then. So how's cotton looking in Mississippi right now?
So cotton's usually planted last out of the crop. So we're about 15% of cotton planted in Mississippi so far. Nationally, we're pretty much on average with where cotton should be this time of year.
So what's cotton looking like on a national level?
So cotton plantings are on pace. They're about right on the 5-year average of where they have been. West Texas, is the largest region of cotton planting. They're getting some timely rains for this time of year. So things are looking good currently. They were looking good last year at this time as well, but as we saw, that cotton crop deteriorated throughout the year. So as of right now, though, things are off to a good start.
So based on what you were saying there, it looks like with the way planting has gone this year, we may have some pretty nice big crops coming our way.
If we base it just off how planting's going so far, we're looking good. But as we all know, the crop's got to get up out of the ground, and it's got all summer to grow. So there's still a lot of opportunities ahead for, weather, drought, other issues going forward. But currently things are pretty good.